This is a story about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we live out in the world, and the space between those two. It's about how we love, how we lose, and how we recover, or not, through the stories we make up in our heads. I'm Robin Rice, and this is also my story. Chapter 27, 7 Years Awake. One of the first courses I ever taught was called The Second Half of the Mountain. It alternated between lessons on daily life as it related to Shamanism, Taoism, and Alchemy. When one path failed to help, one of the others always could jump in. The premise was simple. Any path will take you halfway up the mountain. No path will take you up the second half. There are signposts, hence the class, but actual feet to the ground, that's our journey to take. This is much like the often quoted Joseph Campbell, "You must enter the forest of adventure at the point at which it is darkest, for if there is a way or a path, it is someone else's." Somewhere deep inside, we know this. In fact, we want this. We want our own journey, lonely as it can feel at times. We didn't come here for imitation, however successful it might make us look. We came for authenticity. I believe this is true for each and every one of us. It just takes some longer than others to come around to the idea, and then to trust it. The same is true for our stories, be they fact or fiction. We can follow a genre, story arc, or classic hero's journey touchpoints, and often we should, at least to start. But to make a story our own, we're going to have to go off-piste. We learn the rules of story in hopes of one day breaking them, brilliantly if possible. We sit and pen a first draft, being as cliché as the next writer, but keeping an eye out for that moment when a strange story door opens. We see a plot twist, an uncharacteristic yet strangely heroic next move, a wild hair of an idea, and we bravely let our story go there, wherever there might be and whatever might come. It is as if we were driving to pick up our dry cleaning on the way home from work, as we do every Thursday, and found a ticket to a foreign country on our dashboard. Nearly involuntarily, with no idea why, we turn toward the airport and then into long-term parking B, half wondering when someone will find our car. Or, more likely, how much of the daily rate will be racked up before we chicken out and run back home, as we surely expect we will. As if from a place beyond our own choice, yet clearly of our own choice, we watch as the flight takes off, some flight attendant telling us how to buckle a seatbelt we thought we'd been buckling our entire lives. As the plane lifts off, maybe we think we could have handled this more wisely, covering all the important and premeditated bases, making it easier on ourselves and others. In truth, we could never have imagined such a move, so how might we have readied for it? At this juncture, we see that the story has stepped in and done for us what we could not do for ourselves, concocted a new scenario, taken a fork in the road that until this day, this moment, had never been there before. Maybe a better road, maybe worse, but surely unexpected. All the ways we had previously spreadsheeted our life plot and plans fall into irrelevance. Excited, terrified, and partly numb, we face our story future unarmed, vulnerable, but free. This is authenticity, in storytelling and in life. It's the one brave act we must not, simply cannot deny ourselves, whatever others might say. Following this close to the bone of the unexpected brings confusion, doubt, second-guessing. We must genuinely entertain the possibility of turning back. If we don't, we're not in risky enough territory. If there is no doubt, it's a mock forest of adventure, a sham. We look for others, and if we see anyone, we also see they are way over there, having taken another path up the first half of the mountain. It's likely, if we and they keep going, that we'll reach the pinnacle as close to each other as we were apart at the base. But from this distance still we can only wave. Hi, it's me, Robin, over here. Like you, but not like you. I'm climbing too. And then we put our heads down and get going again, knowing intimately what Mary Oliver said about how we must determine to save the only life that we could save, our own. Because no one has gone before, at least in exactly our way, sketchy indicators are all we get for guidance. As I had found, alchemy gives pointers on turning our base inner aspects into golden soul. The hero, heroine, and anti-hero's journeys provided mythological nods. Shamanism offered a new healing story and energy too. Taoism showed us how to get what we want by going in the exact opposite direction. Magical traditions taught how to bypass the rules of reality, at least for long enough to jump from one sunlit lily pad to the next. But did all this help when jumbled together? For most of history, most of us got exposure to only one path. The worlds of spiritual traditions, like countries before mass transportation, were lived out in distances too far apart to run into more than one, maybe two in a lifetime. If we were lucky enough to stumble upon alchemy as example, we were highly unlikely to be given the keys to ancient Buddhist rituals as well. We might have uncovered the mystical aspects of Judaism or Christianity, but not likely both, and surely not that of shamanism too, though all three are remarkably similar at the essence level. Today, though, it's all right here, right now, like a smorgasbord you can make yourself sick at. Sussing out the story that is both uniquely and genuinely ours is our only hope, and for that we can only go by feeling. This requires, of course, that we are adept at feeling, not shut down or avoidant. We are in tune enough to see the con jobs and self-aware enough to know when we can be seduced in the event it's a really, really good con job. We can look for a teacher, but must beware of giving away our power. We can employ a healer, but must remain alert. Everyone has their shit, and some try to make it ours. We can call on the angels, but they are not there to keep us all from trouble. What's the use of living without a little trouble to teach us a thing or two? We can take a trip, sign up for a retreat, learn a new healing modality downloaded in a temple in Egypt. But be careful, no piece of paper exists to certify the wisdom of the soul. We can even ingest the magic of the mountains of Mexico or Peru or Ecuador. In doing so, we will certainly find a new level of enlightenment, but, in all likelihood, it won't help us pay the mortgage. All of this was no different for me. Authenticity was the goal, and I knew it, but I had a copious amount of alternative directions and a ravenous desire to swallow them all whole, and all at once. I don't advise it, but I also don't ill-advise it either, because, somehow, it was working for me. Enter the labyrinth. For 7 years, I lived awake, aware, and continuously connected to what I had come to call the universe. The two aspects of me were learning to coexist, and if there was going to be a race to the finish, it was clear the greater aspect was going to win. But the lesser aspect, the very ordinary Robin, wasn't about to give up without a fight. Most of the time, out in the real world, I felt out of place, an outsider, as I had always been. But now I experienced a world most others were either unaware of, resistant to, or still in search of. I found few who were like me, and of those, none were in my day-to-day life. In the other worlds, which felt more and more like home, I remained relentless in my pursuit of knowledge, insight, and wisdom. Keyword here, relentless. I recall one guy I briefly dated asking me if I couldn't give it a rest for once. No, I couldn't. And so, as with all the others I dated, we parted. Walking between the worlds, I was intent on sense-making, no matter how very crazy the weird to crazy scale got. The ordinary and magical worlds had to fit with each other, Somehow, I was sure. I needed them to. I did what I could to not spiritually bypass my own faults, wounds, and biases, but it was inevitable, as it is for anyone, no matter what they say or how it appears. Even those with the purest of hearts and intentions will, eventually, realize they have neither a pure heart nor pristine intentions. At least that's become my assessment in hindsight. Regardless, the more word got out about me and my gifts, the more people showed up wanting to be my friend, student, or whatever else. How many times did I hear, "I don't know why I'm here, I just had to come," when they showed up for a shamanic journey or a workshop, even in my relationships? It felt right, and I understood that pull, but being popular for the first time in my life was a powerful seducer for me. I imagine it would be for anyone with a history of rejection such as mine. In short, among my fellow awakening humans, there was now a lot I could get just because I wanted it, including men, and that was a precarious place for my ego to sit. My confidence and charisma had grown too, which made me nervous given my father's all too similar brand of it. I became overly cautious about what I was selling anyone, but that didn't keep them from being eager to buy. My primary way to deal with this, and the countless other things happening all at once, was straightforward. I began regularly taking stock of everything that had happened, and everything that had not, and how I had succeeded or failed. It was all in an effort to make sure I was turning my life into one of service. As one who had been given the gift of awakening, and despite countless flaws, I felt I owed the universe that much. I regularly asked myself, what had changed, really changed, since my awakening, and what had not? What was subjective and what was rationally solid? What added up to something and what seemed to be only bizarre experiences passing through? There were a lot of those. When did I think I knew something but turned out not to? What did I think wasn't true or real that kept showing up to prove itself as at least persistent? What fit with mythology or certain spiritual traditions but not others? What wove a basket you could actually carry something in? Most important, what showed up as truth everywhere and across the board? If I could just look clearly at it all, I thought, I might be able to understand my next steps on the second half of the mountain. Let me save us both years of stories with a rundown of some of the highlights. 7 years in, the tornado that my life had been did in fact settle. Living awake was a new normal, if you will. My kids were growing and doing well. My mother died, though in my own mind I'd buried her years before. I had to. It was just too difficult to watch her post-Ricky life, even from a distance. Once I tried to tell her my truth despite a nearly closed-shut throat. Once was enough. She broke down and cried, and I felt like shit, and that was the end of that. 100 Ways to Sunday had found offers of industry publication, but none felt right. Those early readers who were in touch with the magical worlds loved it, but those in the publishing industry didn't know what to make of it, let alone where to put it on the bookshelf. In the end, I chose to buck the establishment, hold on to all my book rights, and publish it myself. Yet despite investing $50,000 in exposure, sadly, right at the time of 9/11, you would have thought the guides could have warned me about the timing, it sat on distributor shelves. Despite reader after reader telling me how Oprah just had to read it, how it only needed greater exposure, how I should do this or that thing that I had already tried many times, and despite editions in Spanish and German coming out, I watched it remain a commercial failure. It broke my heart and my pocketbook, but the reality was the reality. I wasn't going to earn a living as a writer of books. Take a moment to imagine the disappointment, anger, and frustration of trying, and doing your very best with no apparent support from the universe I loved, and you'll begin to understand what a disappointment not earning a living from writing was to me. I was honored for those who told me 100 Ways to Sunday was one of the top 5 or even 3 books of their lives, and grateful it made my readers want more from me. But still, what was I going to do with my real-world life? Flip burgers and write on the side? I just didn't see a way forward. As for lovers, I had plenty, as many as I wanted, but not love. Not the My Henry kind of love. Which meant that just as guides could not seem to sell books, a myriad of psychics could not see my true love trajectory. If you can understand how the book thing crushed me, you might begin to imagine how the love life did. I read more and more books because there was so much I wanted to discover. I could see insights like golden threads running as through lines, but also authors diving into fantasy realms I just couldn't buy into. Extrapolations that were as nuts as some of my own experiences that they took for truth. Those felt like 1,000 wild goose chases leading nowhere. Compliments of shamanism, I had met many, many guides, both my own and those of others. They came through every time, but still, this was no cure-all in the real world. There were so many, and not one had a singular or necessarily correct perspective. They were not God and did not have a God's eye view. Bird's eye, maybe, but as I have often said, if your dead Aunt Matilda wasn't particularly smart in this life, she's not going to be in the next. I recall one journey undertaken in utter frustration. When would the torment of not understanding end? I met my primary guide, a native male at the time. Primary guides do change, often without notice, go figure. And he took me to meet 2 elder women who were arguing. One was nodding toward me and saying that I'd had enough of this intense initiation, while the other argued vehemently that I needed more. For the record, I was sitting firmly on the had enough side of the fence. I asked my guide which one was right. He looked at me, shook his head, and said only, "Women." It was then that I realized that while I might gain healing, perspective, and a few shortcuts with my guides, the journey of life was still going to be mine to take. Mine alone. It's true for us all. Similarly, I noticed that when 2 different shamans met the guides of a client on a journey, they rarely saw the same ones. I might see a barmaid from the 18th century for a young woman, while another shaman would see a fairy from the wilds of Ireland. This being the case, for me guides became creative images, archetypal avenues for insight, and even dressed-up urges, but not actual individual entities. It was disappointing, but that's growth for you. Be careful if you don't want to see how the sausage is made. Fortunately, my own shamanic work had deepened over these years, adding skill to talent, and my results had become repeatable and reliable. It was rare upon rare that I'd have a client not make sense, perfect sense, of the journey that unfolded, even when I had never met that client before. In fact, repeatable and reliable was my only real personal benchmark, an integrity I demanded of myself and the work. Compared to rational, ordinary reality, I often felt crazy, and I knew the work sounded crazy when described. Yet I knew I wasn't crazy when the work worked, as it always did. Results are results, just as David Davis had said. It was clear that I was, in fact, tapping into some greater reality, and that made it worth doing. I could count on shamanism, and I did. Since flipping burgers was no real option for my soul, and since I'd started out by charging only a plant or a rock in exchange for my shamanic journeys, and since people generally only needed to come once, I had to think about how I would earn a living. My alimony years had run out and my savings wouldn't last forever, so I started teaching workshops. For several years, I went to the ocean with workshops like Writing for Your Life, Shape-Shifting Beauty, and others. It was a full circle experience because this was the same ocean town my family took me to as a young child, the one where my father had wished he'd gone to in order to sell kites in the last days of his life. If nothing else, it was poetic to have arrived in the same childhood vacation spot, but now with something to offer others. After my childhood, I had a sense I'd made it, or was on the way. It, and the power of the ocean, gave me strength. Practically speaking, though, my life had come to feel like a clam in the clutches of a seagull. The seagull of hope kept picking me up, taking me higher and higher into the sky, only to drop me. I'd fall and crack open again and again on the rocks of reality. Every time it hurt more, because something in me was always convinced that that was the last time, in fact, the very last time. Surely, eventually, everything would settle down, make sense, and work out in some kind of happily ever after scenario. Die-hard optimist, yes, but isn't that what I'd seen in my awakening? That everything was perfect? Was that not cause for supreme optimism? Even so, things inside of my personality were shifting. The masculine culture was of less and less interest to me. I liked men, don't get me wrong, a lot. But the hyper-masculine culture was becoming a bore. I wanted to dream my reality into being, not overbuild it with power and will. I wanted to create, not compete. This was not passive femininity, it was potent and driven in its own way. Her own way. I recalled during my awakening saying to whomever it was that I wasn't going to grow my hair long and wear long flowing dresses. But the hair had grown long almost immediately, and the long dresses were starting to have an appeal. Just not flowing gauze, never gauze. More and more, I preferred gathering with women over men, a reverse from my early days. Classic marks of the heroine's journey. Also, my inner life was becoming precious to me. Rumi's poem spoke to the gold hidden inside of us, which emerged in times of trouble. When I looked through my awakened eyes, I saw beauty everywhere. This countered all the frustrations with just a glance. I had begun to live from a deeper place, much deeper. I lived by quotes that I stuck to the wall above my desk. Master the process by which you experience life, and the lessons will have the cleanest possible learning. Or, there's a landscape larger than the one you see. Or, rest in the roots of the grass that has not grown yet. Or, this time to get what I want, I have to surrender. These themes showed up in my journeys. Isis appeared dragging me with her cartoon lasso from my childhood TV shows. When I looked up, I saw beautiful green grass and a sense of the promised land. I asked her why I was resisting, and she said, "Why indeed?" For a long period of time, any time I went into a journey for myself or anyone else, I'd be required to meet an underworld queen who made me put on a crown, cape, and take up a scepter before I could enter through the gate to the journey. When I inquired, there was never an answer as to why, but I sensed I knew. The guides had had enough of my low self-esteem. Despite persistent beauty and body issues, on the deeper level, this ritual was working. I was getting stronger. Overall, I was growing tired of trying to understand and explain my story even to myself, especially to myself. I was, in fact, growing sick of myself. Rather, sick of the self in me. Sicker and sicker all the time. It's a classic stage of the alchemical journey, putrefaction, and I knew it. That didn't stop me from wanting to puke at the woman showing up in my own mirror. When would this self just die? This was embarrassing. I should be further along by now, right? I understood about giving up, but the I that was riding alongside whomever had woken up was not interested at all. Enough of the I already. Yet there would be no going quietly into that dark night for Robin. I was sticking around, damn it. At least so far. What I really wanted through it all, of course, was love. My Henry, my beloved Henry. But he did not come for 7 years and counting. Right around the corner, some corner. It was made worse because I immediately knew when someone wasn't the one, and that was everyone so far. I had a feeling of how it would feel, and anything less was okay, but less. Which meant it was hard to fool myself into the maybe this was him fantasy. Still, on more than one occasion, I tried. I had to wonder, did awakening somehow preclude actual human real-world love? Was I meant to be a monk or just flow with free, unattached love forever? Did the spirits who guided me even exist if they would not help me with this most basic of human needs, which was also my greatest desire? I wasn't asking for much, was I? Didn't Robin deserve something? In the end, on net, my taking stock led only to one truth. The second half of my mountain was a beautiful bitch of a climb. I had to laugh. My bipolar was no longer within me from a mood perspective, thank God. But look, it had escaped me and gone out to manifest in my life. And so it was that after 7 years, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. I had magic, right? Dangerous or not, I was going to use it. On myself. Enter your labyrinth at BeWhoYouAre.com.